Have you ever felt the need to escape civilization or to go somewhere and to just be alone for a while? In today's video, we can talk about why it can be so powerful for INFPs to enjoy and take some time for themselves once in a while. Being introverted, INFPs often do take a lot of time for themselves and need a lot of time for themselves. If they're not taking it, they're probably not feeling great, right? Because alone time is how INFPs say that they recharge energy. And no wonder, when you're alone, you can have and engage in this process of introspection, which is so powerful for the INFP personality type, where you can sit and ask yourself questions, reflect on your feelings, and consider nuances in what you want and what's important to you and what you care about, right? And so, as an INFP, if you don't get alone time, it can feel as if you don't know who you are anymore, like you become disconnected from yourself, a bit shut off. And so INFPs that are in the grip of extroverted thinking might feel so overwhelmed by work and demands on them from the outside world that they simply can't listen to or hear their own inner voice anymore. And this can be a really difficult experience because much of the creativity of the INFP personality type comes from being in this introverted feeling space. And this process, which helps you understand more about yourself, also tends to make you more creative as a person. It gives you more ideas. It makes you feel like your mind is full of things that you want to do. And of course, these are things that you want to do often in the physical, real world, in the extroverted world. But when we feel we are pushed into an environment that we don't like, this can create the opposite kind of experience. If you allow yourself alone time and if you allow yourself to feel okay and good while being alone without feeling a sense of shame or guilt that you should be somewhere with somebody doing something, it can be that these kinds of negative feelings, these kind of pressures, they make you feel more stressed and they make you feel like life isn't your own, right? You're not living your own life. You're not taking the actions. You're not going out and making your own decisions. Things are happening to you and forcing you to be and act a certain way, and a way you don't want to act, right? So being able to be alone is about learning to harness your own energy, right? Because imagine you have your own flow state, your own energy that you can summon and wield and use for everything that life throws at you, right? If you're able to do things your way and respect your own process, typically you'll find that you'll have more flow, more energy, more motivation, more confidence in everything that you do. But if you feel that you have to constantly do what everyone else wants from you, if you feel like you have to constantly compromise yourself to fit in, to adjust, to be what other people want you to be, what's going to end up happening is you're going to feel like you're constantly stressed and anxious because everyone wants different things from you and there is no logical pattern to what other people expect from you. And often the expectations can be quite unreasonable and quite fickle based on what that person thinks but doesn't really know for sure. So often the INFP's power is that in introspection, and the time spent in introspection can feel for the INFP differently for different INFPs. Some INFPs feel great and really enjoy this process. Other INFPs feel a sense of guilt or feel like they're wasting their time or that they are constantly engaged in a process wondering about who they are but getting absolutely nowhere. And so why do some INFPs experience this process so differently? And why and how can INFPs learn to enjoy this process? Well, the first thing you have to recognize is that we internalize an externalized voice from what society thinks. We have this idea of what society thinks, and often when we start to pick this apart, it becomes quite ridiculous. What does society think? Well, society is not a person, right? Who is it? Like, how can society think anything? Society is just a system, right? So it's a system where there are certain actions and certain consequences depending on how you choose to live and how you choose to conduct your life, right? So the society represents the external rules which we all live and abide by, not in the sense that we always follow these rules, but in the sense that if we don't follow them, there's going to be consequences. And so what INFPs have to ask themselves is, what kind of consequences do I want to live with, right? So say you're thinking about, going out and pursuing your passion and starting a floral company selling flowers, right? And flowers with poetry, small gems. Whenever you buy a flower pot, you get this piece of poetry with this cute word, right? Now imagine you want to do that as an INFP. Now, one thing you can resign yourself to is that maybe that's not going to be easy. Maybe that's going to be difficult. Maybe it's going to be hard to make ends meet. Maybe you're not going to make enough money, right? So often the INFP can feel like, oh yeah, because it's going to be difficult, because there's going to be consequences, because it's going to require hard work, there's no point and it's not worth it, and I should probably just give up on that and do something simple that I know will be reassuring and safe and so on, right? So often it's not that the INFP is necessarily feeling like it's impossible, it's that they feel that the consequences are too uncomfortable, too difficult, too hard to abide by, right? So the question here is, how can INFPs learn to accept that there's discomfort in going against the rules, or sometimes sidelining society and doing things, taking the less chosen path, going somewhere different, being somebody different than what is necessarily premiered or rewarded or suggested to you by your current resources and society, right? Because often the case is you don't necessarily have the resources to achieve these goals yet, right? So perhaps you don't have the money to invest in or start this kind of business. Perhaps you don't have the tools. Perhaps you don't have the skills. You never learned how to manage and do these kind of things. You have no idea how to run a business. You don't know anything about finances, managing money. These things are all foreign to you, right? So what do you do? Like, how do you manage these things, right? Now, typically what you're gonna find that is so surprising about alone time is alone time tends to be what gives you this feeling like, oh yeah, so that's how I do it. Oh yeah, so that's the thing. That's like, often it's like when you keep coming back to something, when you keep daydreaming about something over and over again. Often INFPs don't even realize this, but if you keep daydreaming about something over and over again, that means that a part of you, a big part of you, wants to go through with it. A big part of you really does want to do something like that, to that manner. It doesn't have to be the exact way which you imagined it, but a part of you does care about this and does feel like this is important, so this is probably something you should consider, right? Now, often you do need to go out to the external world to embody and engage in these kind of practices, and you often do need to take extroverted actions in order to make these things happen, and you do need to use extroverted thinking once you've come to this point that you realize what it is that you want. But once you know what you want, you're going to find that you have an almost infinite energy to achieve and to work on those kinds of goals, right? So the process of going into yourself gives you the feelings, the importance, the energy, the motivation to go out and do other things. This is a kind of feedback loop, right? Because you go inside yourself, you get the energy and the motivation, and then you use that energy and motivation to go out and do something that might be uncomfortable in the short term, but really positive in the long term. And similarly, if you don't follow this process, if you go the other way, if you choose to do what other people want you to do, you're going to experience stress and discomfort first, and then afterwards maybe you're going to feel like some sense of, yes, I did something that was important to somebody, but now I'm super exhausted, and now I'm going to crash, and now I'm going to move away and get rid of everything, and now I'm just drained, right? So the feeling is completely different. The feeling of going into yourself and focusing on intrinsic motivation is so much more powerful for you as an INFP. And so as an INFP, focus on intrinsic motivation. Focus on things that give you inner sense of energy rather than outer sense of energy. Just because other people are happy for you, and that feels good, recognize that smiles fade quickly, right? So if you make somebody happy for a second, like what's going to end up happening is, they're going to be happy for a second, and 10 minutes later you're going to be somewhere different, and you're going to get something different. And so you can't really rely on the external world for your happiness, because the external world is fickle, chaotic, things change all the time, right? So ultimately the only true happiness is the one that you can find within yourself, and that's something that you want to do because you want to do it. Thank you so much for watching, and see you all in the next video.